Thank you all very much for coming. We only lost 15% of the people to the rain and God knows what else. Thank you all for being here. The reason for tonight is to do away with some misconceptions in the Jewish community and to make the community understand what its role is going forward. It's a long time coming. Perhaps the way it was best put was done by my friend Bret Stephens, who's the only storehouse of reason and sanity at the New York Times, who said in a recent speech at the 92nd Street Y, the only way to fight anti-Semitism is by becoming more Jewish. Stop trying to fight it. Be Jewish, be American, be yourselves, and engage with your fellow citizens. We have a malaise in our community. We have a horribly destructive addiction to blowing things out of all proportion every time something happens. Let me tell you that graffiti on a bathroom stall is not equivalent to 2,000 people listening to Adil Sharkawi say, Allah bring death to the Zionists. But every Jew has to learn that. Now, you're all here for free tonight. There's no charge for this. This may surprise you to have a community event without charge. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. But you all have homework. And your homework is that when you leave here tonight, you have to take this message with you. You have to take this message to the Jewish community. You have to engage yourselves with other communities. And you have to make yourselves feel comme un vrai Québécois et Québécoise, pas une étrangère, pas une minorité dans une minorité. Les jours de ça sont finis. We are Quebecers. Et c'est important pour vous compreniez pourquoi. Parce que nous avons beaucoup des assumptions dans notre communauté, des assumptions concernant la langue, les assumptions concernant la religion, les assumptions concernant la laïcité. Et franchement, c'est important de souligner que ces assumptions n'est pas dans le leadership de notre communauté. By the way, where are you, Ian and Patrick? Good. Mais malheureusement, il y a trop de Juifs qui gardent ces assumptions. I'm going to give you some numbers. I spent most of my adult life fighting anti-Semitism. I'm here fighting for Israel abroad. And there's nothing new. This may shock you, but nothing new happened on October the 8th. I use the 8th because that's when the first demonstrations happened, 2 weeks before Israel went into Gaza. And they turned into anti-Semitism. And they turned into anti-Canadianism. And they turned into anti-Christian. But guess what? You know, when I was president of Hillel and I was at McGill Law School, we had this nonsense in the lower quad every Friday in the 80s. But in the 80s, I had 200 kids who I could call at a moment's notice who would come with me, and 50 of us would surround these animals and thugs in the streets. We would dance a hora with somebody playing a guitar, and nobody was afraid. And nobody must be afraid today. Yet we have had 2 generations where parents have told their children, be safe above all, where being safe is not being Jewish. And I'll tell you what Rabbi Israel Meir Lau, then Chief Rabbi of Israel, told 500 parents in Kotz Luke 15 years ago. You want to be Jewish? This is what it means to be Jewish. To be ready to fight for justice. To fight with courage, spiritually and physically. To teach your children to do the same, to maintain memory and witness, and to be involved in your community. When the Bible says in the book of Numbers, in Bamidbar, that we are a people that dwell alone, that doesn't mean we're not involved. That means we're a people that keep our traditions, but we're involved in the societies we're in and we're not afraid. That fear has to go. And if you need proof of the overreactions, here's proof. So since about November 2023, Neil Oberman, who does such incredible work, and I've been going steady on every legal, yes. On every legal twist and turn you can imagine, from injunctions to actions against the city, to make sure that the law's enforced, to actions against McGill and Concordia. 7 injunctions in a row to protect Jewish institutions and protect Jews were granted by 5 Francophone judges. When I'm in the media, and yes, there's Elias Makos, God bless him, but when I'm on de Trissac, and I'm on Martineau, and I'm with De Rocher or Dominique Marais in Quebec City, il me donne carte blanche sur le micro. Il comprend nos besoins, il comprend que nous sommes les citoyens de Québec, et il comprend nos besoins. Il n'y a pas aucune distance entre nos espoirs et les bœufs. And it is very sad that too many Jews don't understand that. I can tell you there are days when Neil and I know Yair, is flooded with phone calls from panicked Jews over nothing. Over 25 people standing with a Palestinian flag, even with an effigy. And then with all these calls, you feel compelled to act. And we give them what they want, which is publicity. You have to hear some numbers. When I was fortunate enough to last fall to go back into this kind of advocacy full time, and when this synagogue expanded its public affairs and outreach programs to include battles against anti-Semitism and explaining Jewish values and who we are to the outside community, we did it on 5 levels. We had an open door with this government on our needs. Whatever you may think of certain issues with this government, the question of laïcité, the question of une démocratie claire qui est fidèle à les principes du monde occidental est protégée par toutes les lois que le gouvernement du ministre Barrette et le gouvernement de Legault a passées. Et ça inclut la loi 21, ça inclut la loi 9, ça inclut la loi 13, et définitivement, ça inclut la loi 84. Oui, mais ça mérite un bravo. Because you know what 84 says? 84 says that the bankrupt policy of multiculturalism is not acceptable in our society. And Quebec is the only jurisdiction in Canada that is giving us the tools to fight anti-Semitism. Benoît de Trissac m'a demandé, il y a 3 semaines passées, qu'est-ce que la stratégie pour l'élimination d'antisémitisme? J'ai dit, il n'y a pas une stratégie. L'élimination d'antisémitisme, c'est un rêve en couleur. It will never happen. À Sinaï, le bon Dieu donnait ça comme un promis à les peuples juifs. Tu acceptes mes règles, they'll hate you forever. Mais j'ai dit, qu'est-ce que nous avons besoin? C'est les utiles de combattre l'antisémitisme. Et ces utiles étaient donnés par le gouvernement de Québec et par aucun autre gouvernement au Canada. Should we be unhappy that more is not done to enforce simple things? Absolutely. Which is why Neil and I have got this mandamus action going, which we started during the Plante mayoralty. Not, where's Leslie? There's Leslie. Not during this mayoralty. We love you, Leslie. But yes, we do. But there was no reason for us to work that hard. Because Section 63 of the Criminal Code says you can't have demonstrations outside of any building that's there for religious, moral, or benevolent purpose, whether or not anybody's inside. It's called a rule of public order. It doesn't require a charge. Section 66 of the Criminal Code says you cannot have a demonstration that is tumultuous in a residential neighborhood that gives reasonable cause for the residents to fear. The nonsense going on outside the Israeli consulate should have been stopped as a rule of public order. We should not have needed to do the work that we did. Neil has other things to do with his time. He can also make more money doing the other things. I certainly don't need the headaches of discussing public order law with him. But we have a problem. And that problem is there are people, either through ignorance or malice, who don't want to enforce the law. So when I'm standing outside of the Shar Hashemayim and there's a bunch of police officers there and there's two Palestinians or pro-Palestinians who say to me within earshot of the commander of Station 20, Wajsman, you're going to die tonight, and I go over to the commander and say, I think I want to make a charge, and the commander says, under what section? So I told him, and he said, mais, tu penses que je peux comprendre tout la code criminelle? So I asked him, dites-moi, est-ce que vos officiers comprennent la code routière quand ils donnent un billet, quand ils donnent une amende? That must stop. That must stop. But you're not going to stop it. But you're not going to stop it just by screaming in the wind and being a lone voice. You're going to stop it by showing the community you live in that you're not alone. Somebody objected to the theme that we are not alone. That's not a plea. That's something that we're proud of. And that's why tonight we're doing this, because we're making progress in Quebec as in no other place. And part of the reason we're making progress is the work we've done and the help we've received, moral and material, from the people on this stage. Now, when I started to tell you about the levels of work that we do, that the Institute does out of this program here, I talked to you about the legislative, I talked to you about the legal, I talked to you about the media. I can't talk to you about some of the security authorities who have been remarkable. But perhaps nothing has had such an effect in changing this city and changing the attitudes of this city as the work that I've done with the cultural communities represented here, and these are national and regional and local leaders of these. They stood with us. And they continue to stand with us. And it takes courage to stand for something that's true. It doesn't take courage to stand with a Jew. Anti-black racism in the States didn't disappear because Obama was elected president. Nobody knows who they're standing with. Nobody knows what we are. But it takes courage to speak truth to power. Ça prend le courage de dire à une société que les assumptions que vous avez concernant une communauté, un peuple, si c'est pour religion, la couleur de peau, l'ethnicité, c'est simplement les mensonges. It takes courage to say something's a lie. And these cultural community leaders all did it. 2 years ago, I was involved in organizing a major event to raise money for legal advocacy against anti-Semitism that Eric Bissell, who's done so much for so many and made so many things possible, had asked me for help on. And I had to think. I said, okay, how can I help? It can't be just Jews talking to Jews again. The paralysis of analysis is killing our community. We have these multiple conferences. This big one in Toronto, I mean, all well-meaning, but a World Forum Against Anti-Zionism. Wonderful. 28 Jews talking to 2,500 Jews. For what? That's what Bret Stephens meant in stop analyzing. Act. We have a concept in Judaism, Torah im derech eretz. Torah's fine, religion's fine, but in the world, or as the Lubavitch Rebbe used to say, study, keep all the rules, but act. Don't just sit. So at this event, many of the people up here came and stood with our community against anti-Semitism. They supported it morally. They supported it materially. And as this evening was rolling out, I get a call one day from a young man in Mayor Plante's office. Et l'importance de cette histoire, c'est la mentalité que tout le monde comprend en politique, mais ça, c'est la première fois que personne m'a fait l'admission ouverte et claire. J'appelle ce jeune homme François. Il m'a appelé, il dit, Monsieur Wajsman, tu as changé l'équivalence politique à Montréal. J'ai dit, comment ça? Mais avant, c'était très facile pour Mme Plante. 90 000 juifs, 240 000 musulmans arabes. C'est clair qu'est-ce qu'elle veut faire. Mais maintenant, tu as mélangé 350 000 Italiens, 90 000 Grecs, 80 000 Hindous. Maintenant, elle avait un problème. Et j'offre mes excuses à toutes les femmes dans l'audience. I told him that she could stick it up her ass, and I hung up on him. That's what we have to do. So when the Journal de... and not for gain, but because it's the right thing to do, from this podium 2 years ago, Leslie Roberts' colleague, Jim Bass, my old friend, Mayor Pierre Fondallard, in charge of public security, he couldn't make it tonight. He gave the essential line about all our experiences. He said the immigrant experience means you have to push the door with your shoulder a lot stronger just to be treated equally, not to advance. So James de La Paz, who's president of the Quebec Association of Filipino Societies, his people understand that. We understand them. Subhash Khanna, who's chair of the Hindu Mandir, could have a very quiet, easy life. There's no major anti-Hindu anything. Yet he is with us everywhere. He opens his mouth when there's anti-Semitism. He makes statements that count. There's not an Israel rally that he has missed. There's not an Israeli consul general that he hasn't met. Harry DeCranian, who also, like Neil Oberman, can make a lot more money just doing his legal practice. We go back when I was working with the Armenian National Committee or Congress. You were president here, and we were trying to convince, at that time, the Harper government to recognize the Armenian genocide, which he finally did. And there is not one time he's even sat on a Jewish lawyers' alliance against anti-Semitism. There is not one episode that happens that he does not go public on, and he doesn't have to. This man here, I won't go into why I was asked to call him, but there was the urgency to having Quebec recognize and adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. This is the man who, within 72 hours of my phone call, brought in a motion to the National Assembly that was adopted, and Quebec adopted the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. I don't know where to start about Joe Broccolini. I could tell you this. First of all, my personal prejudice. I spent a third of my time in my life with Italians. There's only two kinds of people, with all respect to the Jews out there. There's two kinds of people. There's Italians and those who want to be Italian. He doesn't need this. He really doesn't need this. He's building half of Montreal. And yet, for whatever reason, as president of the National Italian-Canadian Community Foundation, not a local leader, a national leader, every time there is an anti-Semitic act, he speaks. Every time there is a Jewish event that addresses that, he is there morally, materially. The event I told you about 2 years ago that Eric started, Joe ended up co-chairing it with him for the first time in Montreal's history. A Jew and an Italian co-chaired an event against anti-Semitism. You know, I'll tell you something. It was in 2006, 2007. For whatever reason, a certain media in Montreal started printing one cover story after another against Italians. No, not against organized crime, against Italians. Let me say at the outset, if it wasn't for Italians and Jews who came here after the war, there wouldn't be a Montreal. After 4 days, because this comes to the base level. This comes to people and people. This comes to going to the dépanneur in the restaurant. So after 4 days of this, I wrote a column that was syndicated. And on the 5th day, the asshole rested, and there was no more cover story against the Italians. Now, j'ai reçu beaucoup des prix et mérites dans ma carrière, mais il n'y a pas une qui compte à le même niveau quand 2 jours après la publication de cet article, je rentre dans un restaurant Milano sur la rue Jarry-Est. I ordered my usual Philly steak sandwich. No offense to kosher laws. And Marco's father, what was his name? Who owned it? I forgot to. He says, your money's no good here. I said, why is my money no good here? He says, take a look at the wall. And on the wall, on a section of wall were 2 things. A picture of Pope John Paul II and my article that attacked the prejudice here. And he said, anybody who wrote that article, they don't pay here. It's at the human level. We like to talk about grassroots campaigning and grassroots politics. First of all, be human with humans. Then talk about grassroots organization. Denis Coderre knows about being human. Yes, he's a politician. They do things. Being a politician is not a dirty word. And when you stand up for something that you believe in, whether or not it's in your paramètre, it's a good thing. So we have our own Jeremy Levi who put up a flag of Israel in Hampstead. And we have people who complained about it, even Jews. Are they out of their bloody minds? It's suddenly a controversial issue to put up a flag of a Democratic ally who has helped so many people of its people butchered. But you know what Denis Coderre did? That was totally outside his. You could argue, well, Hampstead, 75% Jewish. Under Denis Coderre, and it was an initiative he did with Eric Bissell. Every Holocaust Remembrance Day, on the steps of City Hall, we read out the names of the dead. Not from 3 years ago and on October 7th. From at that time, 70 years earlier. He didn't have to do that. He didn't get points. Because where most Jews live, they can't vote in the Ville de Montréal. Because they live in the Ile de Montréal. Don't get me started on that. But he did that. This is courage. That's why the awards we're going to give out tonight is called Les Flammes de Courage. Reverend Ken Godon is the senior pastor at the Downtown People's Church. We understand that his particular denomination, they're very pro-Israel, they're very pro-Jewish, but he is everywhere. You drop a pin against a Jew in the outskirts of Montreal, he'll hear it and he'll come and talk, and he'll come when there's 5 people standing in Place de Canada to hold an Israeli flag or to hold a sign against anti-Semitism. That's human commitment. That's where you make your connections. I first heard about Mandana Javan when we all first heard, yes. When we all first heard about the intimidation of Christian worshipers at Notre Dame Basilica with the public intimidative prayers by Islamists. And with everything else she's got going on, she's a mother of a young son, a physicist, a leader in the Iranian civil rights movement. And please notice that the flag behind her that I ordered is the lion and sun flag. She decided that we are going to speak out loud as Québécois et Québécoises qui ici, c'est pas le Moyen-Orient, qui ici, tu veux votre religion, c'est une question privée, qui ici, une femme ne doit pas être couverte dans une burqa, et qui ici, nous avons les droits de locomotion, de commerce, la liberté, et de vivre sans la peur et sans la menace. Et elle a organisé, au début, 50 Québécois et Québécoises, avec les drapeaux du Québec, la musique jouée, genre de pays. I think I met her in the second week of those demonstrations, chaque dimanche. By the fifth week, I had invited people from all these communities, including our own. And I think that last Sunday, we were 500 and they were 150, and they left Place d'Armes. La bataille contre l'antisémitisme, c'est pas juste une bataille pour les Juifs. Dans chaque pays, dans chaque période d'histoire, quand ça commence avec les Juifs, ça termine avec tous les autres. And I know that Reverend Godin's, one of his favorite stories, is the story of a Lutheran pastor named Martin Niemöller. Martin Niemöller was a German anti-Nazi who was finally taken to Auschwitz. And by the way, till today, where his, if you could call it a bunk, where he lay, he scrawled with his fingertips these words. First, they came for the trade unionists, but I was not a trade unionist, so I said nothing. Then they came for the Catholics, but I wasn't a Catholic, so I said nothing. Then they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I said nothing. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. And that's the lessons, les choses les plus importantes dans notre travail, dans la sensibilisation de la communauté, dans les affaires publiques, dans la lutte contre l'antisémitisme, c'est de comprendre les besoins des autres communautés et de prendre notre place côté à côté avec leurs besoins. It's better than television, it's better than sports, and forgive me, sports fans, it's better than hockey or basketball finals. When you stand with people qui avaient une réalisation de leur rêve, une réalisation de leur dignité, there's nothing better than that. Joel de Bellefeuille is another example of somebody who doesn't need to do what he does. Successful businessman, family man. He realized racism isn't finished. Racism isn't finished against blacks. Racism isn't finished against anybody, and it's the same racism. It's the same mentality. So we organized something called the Red Coalition. Cosimo La Rosa sits on his board. Cosimo's here somewhere tonight. Which has now become the most important, vigorous civil rights organization representing the black community in Quebec. Yet, with all the problems they have, and they have problems, as I said, the racism didn't end with the election of Barack Obama. I've been involved with the suspension and firing of over 40 Montreal police officers over the past 24 years for anti-black racism. That's why I won a Martin Luther King Jr. award. While he's involved with that, all of a sudden one day we met and I get a call because of something that happened to Jews. Now this guy lives, where do you live now, in Saint Lazare? Saint Lazare, except you don't think he lives in Saint Lazare. It's like a small country in his estate, but that's okay. So it's not enough that he schleps in for the Red Coalition and his communities. he's there for hours. And you're going to be damn sure that I'll be there, as I have been for most of my life, for his. That's how I started in activism. I was 15 in Northmount High School. Anybody remember Northmount High School? Half black, half Jewish. Except the black kids were always getting hassled by the cops from Station 26. And they were too scared to talk. I was an arrogant white Jewish kid. So I talked for them. And that's how it started. That's how the whole righteous anger started. Elias Makos is perhaps a remarkable... What the hell did I just do? It's perhaps quite a remarkable story. Because media today... H.L. Mencken, the great editor of the Baltimore Sun, said in 1922, if it's snowing outside, you don't have to open the window and stick your head out to see if it's snow or rain. You can use your brains. That's not an easy thing to do in Elias's position and in the world of corporate media. And there isn't a time, there is not one incident where Elias doesn't lead off his show with a denunciation of anti-Semitism, with a warning to the city about anti-Semitism, with a warning to every other community. No equivocation. I could quote you, but that'll be embarrassing. No moral equivalency. He doesn't feel the need to throw in, let's not hate anybody, let's not hate blacks, let's not, hate Muslims. No, because there's an understanding and a courage that what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. It poisons notre rêve pour Québec. Et notre rêve pour Québec, il parle beaucoup de patrimoine maintenant, parce que M. Legault a démissionné. Et j'ai écrit une chronique dans le National Post that I think Terry Newman edited. Terry, there you are. Et s'appelait, she's incredible. Best editor in the national press, right here, and she lives in Montreal. The article was titled, and I think you redid my title, but it was a better title. François Legault, le défendeur des valeurs occidentales au Canada. Why? I know what you don't like about the Legault government. The language, the health, the Northvolt. That's not patrimoine. That's not legacy. Patrimoine, c'est quelle sorte de société avec quelle sorte de valeurs. Pas erreur, valeurs te laissent quand te quittes. Et les valeurs de ce gouvernement, c'est une société qui comprend que la laïcité n'est pas une menace à la religion, qu'aucune soumission à demande extrémiste théocratique, c'est actuellement une protection pour tout le monde, pour chaque religion, pour chaque confession. It's time we understood that too. And what is very interesting is that it is the nationalist parties, the so-called nationalist parties, that are getting this. So for all of you provincial liberals out there, get Charles Milliard to understand that too. Because none of what we need has been supported by that party, tragically. And many of you know that I have a lot of friends in that party. It is not a policy to want to be loved by everybody. That is perhaps politics, because I'm looking at what Jacques Cole is thinking right now, and he's saying, of course it is. No, it's not. It's poison. It's poison to the body politic. It may get you some votes, but it's going to poison your society. And you don't want your children, your grandchildren living in a society under a government qui défend rien et soumet à tous. And this is not new in Quebec. This may surprise you, and forgive me whoever I told this story to earlier, but I'm going to repeat it. Yes, Quebec had bad years. We had la Grande Noirceur après la Première Guerre. Nous avons Duplessis et Émilien Hood et Abbé Groux et Adrien Arcan. Yeah, they were lousy years for 25, 30 years. But up until World War I, Québec était la lumière de l'Occident. En 1838, quand il y a la rébellion des Patriotes, le chef était Louis-Joseph Papineau. Son meilleur ami était une juive par le nom d'Ezekiel Hart, une membre de la première famille juive au Québec. M. Hart était élu comme membre de l'Assemblée nationale de Trois-Rivières. Il ne veut pas prendre une assermentation sur une Bible catholique. In the middle of a revolt, Papineau a pris le temps de retourner à Québec. Il a convaincu l'Assemblée nationale d'éliminer la provision de religion pour prendre une assermentation. Il peut prendre une assermentation civile et Ezekiel Hart était le premier juif dans l'Assemblée nationale. Fait par un nationaliste. En 1839, l'année prochaine, l'année juste après cet incident, Lionel de Rothschild était élu comme un député dans le Parlement de Grande-Bretagne. Lionel de Rothschild, of course, was a Jew. He also wanted to give a civil oath, to take a civil oath. Parliament said, no, you're going to swear on the Anglican Bible. Lionel de Rothschild could not take his seat. Lionel de Rothschild got reelected 3 more times, and it wasn't until the late 1850s that Britain changed its law and allowed for an assermentation civile. We were first. In 1863, we had a part of the Confederation debates. There was a very famous debate between Sir Georges Cartier, you know, the guy statue on Mount Royal, who helped MacDonald make this country, and Aimé Dorion. Yes, Dorion, the city. Aimé Dorion was head of the nationalists. Et Cartier a demandé l'appui des nationalistes de Québec pour Confédération et pour la Constitution. Et Dorion a dit à Cartier, oui, je suis prêt, mais je veux une garantie dans la Constitution que nous pouvons avoir les partis politiques avec une ligne de religion et de langue. Et Cartier a dit, non, j'ai un rêve d'un nouvel caractère politique, sans aucun lien, ni avec religion, ni avec la langue. Et Cartier a gagné, et Dorion a signé. This is not new, this is part of the patrimoine of Québec. In 1865 at the Quebec Conference, the first man, there were only 2 people who've been assassinated in Canadian history, 2 politicians. Anybody name the most recent one? Anybody, just raise your hand. No. Thank you. Mais le premier était Thomas D'Arcy McGee, père de Confédération. D'Arcy McGee started out as a Fenian socialist, Irish socialists. By 1865, at the Quebec Conference, he said, il y a la place dans cette dominion du Nord, sous un drapeau et sous une série de lois pour un grand peuple. There is room in this Northern Dominion under one flag and one set of laws for one great people. Mais il a dit, il n'y a pas une possibilité pour ça si nous soumis à les demandes des centaines de particularités. But there is no possibility of that greatness, he said, if we submit to the demands of 100 squabbling particularities. That is why the legacy left here, and particularly Bill 84, is so important. Multiculturalism, Pierre Trudeau said once, at an evening where he was being feted by the old Cité Libre people in 1995. And he said, I meant multiculturalism to be a compassionate way of teaching immigrants about les valeurs universelles occidentales. I didn't mean it to be a political pig trough, which it's become. If a country, if a nation, and Quebec is a nation, it's a society, si une nation n'est pas prête de défendre quelque chose, ça va tomber à toutes les choses. If a nation does not stand for something, it'll fall for anything. And that's what we're trying to avoid. The battle against anti-Semitism is a battle against those who hate Jews, who hate Christians. You've heard it. Death to Canada, death to Jews, death to Catholics. If we don't address it, we won't have anything worth defending. George, I'm going to screw up your name. You got to give it to me again. So, Kritos. George is the executive director of the Hellenic community of Greater Montreal. And there's just something, I don't know. I mean, there's just some, I've mentioned Jim Bass before and Elias. There's nothing that has escaped the Hellenic community. What?
That's a Greek question. That's the question. Greek section. I said that's the Greek section.
I didn't mean it that way, but okay. Thank you, Denny. Merci, merci, Achi.
No.
You know, he sends me a text. I
know why it's
Shabbat Shalom, Achi, because he's now, you know, fluent in Hebrew. It wasn't meant that way. Didn't you tell me you were going to behave tonight? Thank you. There isn't an event where you not only see Greek leadership. The president of the community, Metro Basil Angelopoulos, couldn't be with us tonight. They're not only marching, they're not only talking, they're marching under a banner that a remarkable young lady named Jasmine Lura started called the Hellenic Jewish Partnership. And I had the privilege one year of marching behind that banner with Jim Bass, with the Israeli consul, with the Greek consul, and with somebody who I don't remember, could have been Nick Pagonis or somebody else. We all stand shoulder to shoulder. That's the point of this evening. That's the point of this society. That's the point of protecting une société laïque, démocratique. That's the point of everybody being engagé, not in our little corners, not analyzing why they hate us. They could all analyze it too. Somehow I don't see the Hindus analyzing this. I don't see the Armenians analyzing. I don't see the Greeks analyzing. And there's people. The blacks don't analyze. They're the best. They attack you. And that's what you should do. When Menachem Begin said, I am not a Jew on bended knee, the blacks get it. Somehow we're still analyzing. Stop analyzing. What you're going to leave here tonight with, and this is the homework. You weren't charged anything. You're going to go home with a new attitude. You're going to go home comme un Québécois et Québécoise. You're going to go home avec une confiance dans les lois qui nous protégeront, and you're going to convince your neighbors that you're not going to go to anywhere else where they're going to analyze why they hate Jews. They do, and they will. There'll always be some. But what you're seeing on this stage is more than half the population of the island of Montreal. Do you understand that? So, of course, some of you are going to say to me, but Beryl, they don't go on the front page. Look, that's media. Give the media 15 animals who are hanging up an effigy. And by the way, effigies have been used since the French Revolution. Andrew Jackson was burned in effigy every week that he was president. It sells papers. It's clickbait on digital. We are better than that. We are supposed to be more intelligent than that. And we have to lead our own community to understand and separate the wheat from the chaff. There are issues that we go to war on, and there are issues that we do not bother with. We certainly don't give the PR to these little gangs that have been reduced from thousands to hundreds to dozens. That's all that's left. Their money's gone. And the people that count, that actually run society, that run businesses, believe me, they're looking at the name of every job applicant and they're asking, where were you when? But that's not going to make the front page. And that's fine too, because real power is done in the back channels. Real change is done in the back channels. Survival is done that way. We just got to get over ourselves and get into the game. In a province, in a jurisdiction qui donne les utiles à notre communauté de combattre la haine. Thank you.